Thank you very much, James. Thank you very much for joining. And I have watched some of your videos. I liked what you say in those videos. I like your approach. I like what you describe and how you describe it. And I think you have put a lot of work in those videos, those animations. Even your article I found very good. So thanks again, and I will, in a minute or so, I will give you a chance to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about yourself, your background, your website, some introduction like your basic message, basic teaching, even if it's not a teaching, just like basic theory. And I was going to say something else, but I forgot. So now I will let you speak.
Thank you, Arvind. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all your wonderful comments too about some of the works that I've done. My background mostly is in yoga. I started yoga practice just simply out of curiosity and wanted to do something that was different. And the particular yoga was Iyengar yoga, which is, the hallmark of it is precision, so it's very technical. And I enjoyed that and did that for about 15 years and had the opportunity to study with BKS Iyengar and with the Iyengar family and with many Iyengar yoga teachers in different locations, you know, largely in North America, but also in India. It was very beneficial to be exposed to Iyengar yoga, and in that process, I connected with the works of Jiddu Krishnamurti and started to ask some deeper questions, and I wasn't getting answers via the yoga approach that I was doing. So I started looking around, and through some friends and through an article in the Yoga Journal, I discovered John Klein. And the instant I met John Klein, without actually teaching me anything, all of my questions fell away, and there was a certain shift in understanding just by being around him. I had studied and read many things before I met John Klein, but he was a living representation of all those works. And so I got to see, here's a human being who lives this particular way. And so just being in his presence was largely the teaching for me. And like you said, I don't necessarily have a teaching myself. There's an understanding that I speak about, which is the understanding of non-duality. And so in that sense, it does fit under the general umbrella of Advaita. And like everybody else, it's my particular understanding of non-duality. And naturally, it affects whatever I say and do. And it's the guideline for how I approach life. If it can be condensed in a few sentences, the general approach is that the problem is self-ignorance, and the solution is self-knowledge. And when I say self-knowledge, I'm not talking about the knowledge associated with science or studying a language. It is a kind of knowing, but it's the knowing that's based on insight, wisdom, clarity. It's not something that can be really intellectualized or conceptualized. So we do speak around it, and we do talk about the understanding of a way of being that is non-duality. And because you really can't speak about it, we do the best we can to approach it via metaphor. And if there is a definitive quality to the general approach, it is mostly that we state what you're not. And by being really clear about what you're not, then in a certain way there's something that is still there. And so it's like dancing around in a circle but never actually going into the center. So the center is the understanding that unfolds by defining what you're not and getting really, really clear about that. And when you're clear about what you're not, then you don't hold it intellectually anymore the way that it may have been held previously. And yet there is still a continuity to being. and there's a knowing that knows itself, and that would be the understanding of non-duality.
Thank you very much, James. And again, very clear, very good. And I think you have been very lucky, or you say, I mean, grace has met you in many different forms in yoga, which I think is superb. I mean, my feeling is that once you are cured at the level of body, mental problem also pretty much go away. And then you read some great teachers like Vijiddu Krishnamurti and met a great teacher like Klein. So you have been very, very blessed. And so I think you have been lucky in that respect. So one thing I was going to ask you was that I see, I mean, your ID or name as Nisarga. So if you can say something about it, why you chose that ID, or what is the meaning of it?
Yes, Nisarga means without parts, and the inspiration to choose this name is from Nisargadatta Maharaj, who is an Advaita teacher, a person who is he's most well known for a book called "You Are That," or I'm sorry, "I Am That," and it's it's kind of a key reference for non-duality and the Advaita Vedanta approach to the true nature of being. And so I kind of like Nisargadatta because he's a bit radical. It's not the typical picture that one has about a spiritual teacher, and yet this person is very clear. And that work, I Am That, and other books which are really transcripts of his teachings, it's a very clear voice. And so I like the term because of what it means, meaning without parts. It's another way of saying non-duality. And I like it especially because it's connected with Nisargadatta Maharaj, whose teachings I very much appreciate.
So one of my friend, I mean, he talks about that reality, realization, awakening, or truth. I mean, talking about it is like talking about health. So if you start describing health, usually you can only describe it in negations. Okay, you can say that, okay, you don't have that disease, you don't have that disease, you don't have pain, you don't have ache, you are not depressed. So it's usually not this, not that, not that. So basically, you cannot really describe what health is. Health is something that you might feel. And when you feel health, it is something like not feeling. So whenever you are feeling body, you are feeling usually because there is some ache, some pain, some kind of sensation. Otherwise, the body has no problem. It doesn't have any need to communicate to you, to consciousness, to brain, to awareness, whatever you want to call it. So that channel, that feeling is silent. So that's why even in enlightenment, realization, you can call it peace, you can call it beyond concepts, beyond words, beyond ego, beyond ID, because all the communication that is happening is kind of a disease, a problem. That's the only thing that is being communicated. Once all of them have disappeared, basically what you have is silence, peace. I mean, it's hard to describe it in words. And maybe when you met Klein, you felt that silence, that peace, more than what he said, more than what you read. Even people around Ramana Maharshi reported to have felt same thing. He spoke very little, but in his presence, even their own thinking, their own mind, their own logic, intellect started falling out. So, whatever you want to comment on that.
Yes, Arvind, thanks. That's a good analogy. The understanding of health and dis-ease. So if you break the word dis-ease up into those two words, dis-ease, then you're quite right in terms of the experience is when the body is healthy and when the mind is healthy, then there is no disease. And so silence in that way is experienced as a beingness that is not disturbed in any way. It's not diseased in any way. And that's a real pointer to our true nature. And you're quite right about Jean Klein. Much of his so-called teaching was silence itself. When he spoke, it was really clear that these words are arising from silence. And the way he behaved and spoke was such that it didn't break the silence. There was speaking, there was teaching that was quite profound, and yet there was always this quality of silence and an invitation to be that same way, so that in the listening there was just that, there was silence. And then the experiential quality of presence that is available around such a wise, sage-like person as Jean Klein, that is really the teaching. And in the way that you just spoke about health, one can approach it in that kind of way to see, well, what is it that is being experienced? In so-called good health, you could say there's no real experience. The nature of our being, it has an organic memory of perfect health. And when there is the yoga, which I describe as resonating with or union with the true nature of being, well, if there is this resonance with this organic memory of perfect health and well-being, then that's experience of silence, of stillness, and there's a spacious, open, empty quality to it. So in all of those ways, the analogy that you're using about health and the way it manifests, both for the physical form and psychologically, there's no suffering, there's no disease, there's no disorder, there's simply resonance with the true nature of being. In another word, that's non-duality. That's the living experience of the non-duality, and that's a way to so-called taste it.
Thanks again. So I have like 3 questions, 3 comments. So I will ask them now before I forget. Okay. So the first question was that so you have been doing yoga for a few years. So if you can describe how this has impacted your health, your physical being, and if you still experience those physical health benefit, that was one thing. And second thing, I am guessing that you must have had some so-called awakening, realization, enlightenment experience. I mean, any experience which is a kind of like out of ordinary. You can name it anything you want, a special, something that is unexpected. So if you can describe it a little. And the third question was related to non-duality. So non-duality is a very, very popular term today in a spiritual realm. A lot of people talk about it, but I think different people mean slightly different thing about it. So if you can talk about your perspective, what do you mean by this word? So these are 3 questions. I know it might take some time to go over them. So I'll mute myself and I'll let you speak.
Thank you, Arvind. Yes, my practice of yoga, it has been, and is very beneficial physically, psychologically, and in every other way. What I remember was I had been doing different kinds of exercises, some physical approach to health and well-being. And a friend of mine who I was exercising with told me about a yoga class that he'd gone to, and he was raving and raving about this yoga class and this particular teacher and how different it was. And to be honest, I wasn't interested at all, because I was really focused on the exercise that we were doing at the time. But then he said these magic words, and the magic words were, there's a lot of nice-looking women there. And so, you know, being a young male, that intrigued me, and I liked the idea of something different, and to be able to connect with, you know, some women, and particularly women that may have a slightly different perspective on things. So we're going back quite a little while in time now, because this is in the early 70s, or 72, 73, maybe, and around there. So I was pretty young, but quite interested in what my friend had meant by a lot of nice-looking women. And so next day, literally, I was in that yoga class. And yeah, it was true. There were a lot of nice-looking women there, but they really weren't interested in me. And fortunately for me, though, the actual practice of the yoga was like coming home. It was physically quite challenging, but it was very different, and I hadn't done anything like it before, and I knew intuitively there's something really worthwhile in this. And especially when we did, after a couple of weeks, I learned to do the shoulder stand pose, Salamba Sarvangasana. And there was something very profound that happened when the very first instant I did that pose. And there's a quality of caring, nurturing that I still feel today when I do that pose, and you know, this is like 40 years later. And so I was very, very lucky, as you've already mentioned, that I came upon certain things in my life, yoga being one of them. And very quickly, although I kind of came in the back door for the purposes of why I started there originally, I very quickly became very interested in what yoga is really all about. And that's where I started reading all those books that are typical of somebody seeking to find deeper answers to the profound questions of life. So I read every yoga book I could find, and started, you know, exploring deeply and practicing daily yoga from a relatively early age. And so very fortunate that the activity happened in the way it did for me, because it certainly took care of my health and was a doorway to well-being, and it allowed me to ask some really good questions. I had some questions, the general questions of life, but I started to ask some deeper questions as I started to understand things a little bit more. And I still practice today. I teach yoga somewhat from time to time, but I also do my own practice, and I attend other classes with other teachers as well, because it's really practical. It's hard to get a better group of exercises or activity that is like yoga. You know, the asanas of yoga, the poses, they've stood the test of time. They've been around for thousands and thousands of years. So there's a reason why they've been around for that long. And I'm living proof of someone who's benefited very much from this particular practice, physically, psychologically, and in all kinds of other ways that, you know, are too numerous to mention. Did I have any actual enlightening experiences or awakening experiences? You know, I've had moments, but I never had any kind of like earth-shattering epiphany that my life is altered from that moment on. It's been kind of like a very gradual process for me of kind of easing into these things. There were definitely moments where, you know, there was some kind of profound insight, and then later I get a little bit more clear with this, and then maybe another insight and things of that nature. But there were a couple of things, and they were like meeting Jean Klein, because I had a lot of questions prior to meeting him, but just the quality of being around him, every question I had just simply fell away. And I was happy for no reason whatsoever. It was just simply there, just being around him. And so at the time, I wasn't even thinking about it. I have to think about it now, or I thought about it after the fact to be able to say, "Oh, that guy's my teacher." But when I was around him, there was no thoughts at all. It was just simply being, and this feeling of uncaused joy just to be around such a person. Earlier in my life, I had similar kind of things. In a sense, and that is associated with my grandmother, my father's mother. This woman loved me unconditionally. It's just, again, I've had lots of blessings in my life, and this is one of the better ones. She's just simply behaved as I just described. She loved me unconditionally, and it was a great benediction for me to have had somebody so close to me that was the living example of unconditional love. And even in my young formative years, I didn't really understand this, but I knew that there was something about her way of being that was extraordinarily special. And I benefited directly from her way of being. So there was a teaching there in her approach to life. She wasn't obviously trying to teach me anything specifically, but her way of being was a teaching that had a profound impact on me. And it was, when I look back on my life, I can see that when she died, I made a vow. I literally made a vow to myself. I wrote it down. I was 14 years old, that I wanted to understand what she understood, and what is it about her that caused her to behave this way. So I knew that there was something really worthwhile in her approach to life itself. And when I again look back, I can see that every decision that I made, the connections with yoga and the questions that came about, and all the choices that I made in my life, had to do with resolving that vow to understand this. And then meeting John Klein. John Klein was like the male version of this grandmother of mine. They even somewhat look alike. And I met John Klein near the end of his life. Here is this fully mature human being who appeared like this very loving, very caring, grandfather-like fellow. And to me, he would be the male equivalent of my grandmother. And the feeling space around him was identical. So I knew that this was the answer to these vows that I'd made, or this vow that I'd made many, many years ago. And that's why all the questions fell away. So I certainly did have some kind of awakening experiences, but there were no bells and whistles or anything of that nature. And this ties right into my understanding of non-duality. And the understanding of non-duality is that there simply are not two things. There's no Janes to be enlightened. So the whole process of pursuing, well, that's generally called seeking. And so the seeking is really the problem. That has implications. What's implied in it is that I'm not there now. And then there is the two things. There's me, and then this understanding of enlightenment or Advaita or whatever non-duality is. And I have to come to that understanding. So there is built into that a separation. And again, I'm meeting Jean Klein. Here's a person who really isn't a person at all. There is a quality of communication and things that took place, and you could say, okay, there's a physical form there that we label John Klein, and he would acknowledge that, functionally, that there is this form and there is your form, and on the very superficial level they appear to be separate, and it's just that, an appearance. But the teaching and the understanding and the way of being that's not betrayed at all by somebody who really understands is not really a teaching. It's not a teacher-student relationship. There's just simply not two. And the celebration of being that the so-called two people who would understand this, the way that they interact is a very different quality of relationship than what I call the object-to-object relationship, which is very common. It's the way that most people behave, because the average person, again, like I was saying earlier, does not understand the true nature of being, and then the approach is to understand, well, what you're not. And the object-to-object relationship is clearly what you're not, because the understanding that most people have, if you ask a random selection of human beings what their experience of life is, they typically will identify with their body and say that, you know, I'm here located somewhere within this body, and I'm a separate individual from the world of objects, from other people, and they describe an internal separate self and an external world that they experience. So they experience duality, and that's the nature of the duality. Non-duality, it's speaking about the unspeakable, so we give a label to the true nature of being as non-duality. And I speak about it metaphorically, like a coin. And it's a coin that has only one side. And so that one side is, or the one-sided coin, is a metaphor for non-duality. And when we think about coins, the way that I illustrate this is I ask a person to take a coin, take a look at it, and then put it into the palm of your hand. So it's lying flat in the palm of your hand. And then without referring to memory or whatever you know about coins, just to simply be with this experience and see that the coin resting in the palm of your hand, you can only see one side. Now, even if you have no real knowledge of coins, you do have knowledge of forms, the way that things show up in time and space. And so you could intuitively guess that there is a second side without having to turn the coin over. That second side is unseen. And the way to understand non-duality is just very much like that. It's that unseen side. Now, that unseen side, not only is it unseen, it's not a thing. We would typically say it's nothing. And that's the nature of non-duality. It's not a thing, but in a certain way, that coin, with a coin that has two sides, the one side somehow makes the other side possible. And in the non-duality coin, in that metaphor, in that example, the side, which is nothing, in a certain way, provides space for all things. And if I allow my mind to be silent, or each of us allow our mind to be silent for a time, there's no discontinuity to being, and yet there is being. So a fundamental truth is that even though I can't explain what you truly are, I can't really explain non-duality, the experience of being itself is self-evident. I may not be able to say what you are, but you can clearly see for yourself that you are. And we speak of that as being, and the key to that word is the ending, ing. So it's active, it's alive, and that's clearly felt. In a very similar way, when we are looking at that coin that I was just illustrating, the non-duality coin, this side, the realm of time and space, there are all these forms that are here. So that's like the visible side of the coin. The invisible side of the coin is no thing. And when you look at the word thing, it has the same ending. It's spelled T-H-I-N-G. And so that implies an activity. And we do see this, that even when the mind is silent, there is thinking, feeling, sensing, perceiving. It's alive, active. So that's the nature of being, is that whatever we are, it is clear that it expresses itself. That's an activity. So what we are is something which is alive, active. That's a quality of it. In fact, that's its essential quality, is that it expresses itself. So it's nothing, yet it is expressing itself. And the forms that we see are its expression. So another way of saying non-duality in terms of the experience of being when the mind is silent, it's clear that we're aware. There is this awareness. We have different forms that the thinking mind describes as thinking, feeling, sensing, touching, all the things that we're doing, breathing. So Each of those experiences are forms of being aware, seeing, touching, tasting, those qualities. They're different ways that we are aware. And so this awareing is the nature of being. You're simply aware. And that activity in form is this human body, this brain, this mind. So clearly that's what it is. That's what it's made up out of. What it's made out of. It's made out of awareness, and it is self-evident that it manifests in these different ways, smelling, touching, tasting, etc. So the understanding of non-duality is very much like that coin that is one-sided. There really aren't two sides, because the side that is not visible really is not a thing. It's not something which is in the realm of form. So time and space do not apply to that so-called side of the coin. And I'm only speaking about that so-called side of the coin for the purpose of being able to say anything about it at all. There really is no such thing as two sides. So that person that I just spoke about earlier, when you do that survey and take a cross-section of people, and I speak with that person who has this understanding, I'm this inside separate self, and I experience an outside world. So when I tell that person, look, this body that you say that you are, you sense that in the same way you sense all these other forms. So what is it that sees that? And that's a very good question to ask such a person. What is the actual seeing itself that sees your body, that can see your thoughts, that can be aware that you're having some kind of an emotional experience? That itself is very much like the experience of this non-duality coin. That what the person is seeing are all the forms, and that which is seeing is not a thing, and it's what I'm calling non-duality. So this can be communicated in this kind of way through this metaphor, and particularly through the experience of asking a person to explore in these ways and to just simply be honest with what they're experiencing. The outcome of such investigation is that they discovered that this whole thing about who I thought I was is just that. It's something that was mentally generated. It's an idea that was formed based on conditioning, the conditioning of parents who gave you a name and then taught you to respond to that name, and even praised you when you responded to the name. Then they teach you about your form, your body. And again, they praise you when you so-called get it right. Your siblings, your teachers, society are all accomplices in this conditioning process. They teach you to have this mental understanding of who and what you are, and then to act from there. And so this identity is formed, and it's very deep-rooted. It is there in the realm of time, and it's there in the realm of space. So people have this idea that they exist in time, and they feel that they exist in space. And what that idea is just that. It's an idea. So when we can see that it's an idea, we can see that ideas, well, they have their place. There's nothing really wrong with ideas or concepts. We can use them in very functional, practical ways. For example, I'm doing it right now. When I'm talking about non-duality, I've made an idea out of it. Now, I know the idea is not real, but I am using that term to be able to speak about it at all. So in that way, the concept of a personality, my responding to the name James and connecting with this body, that has its place. In the realm of form, it's very functional. Yet, when I investigate and look for this James that I think that's associated with his body, I don't find an inside self that experiences an external world. I only experience seeing, awareness. And even though it may be said that that's my true nature, seeing or awareness, I have to be really careful that I'm just not making another concept out of this, replacing one concept with one that seems more subtle, more profound. Oh, now I'm awareness. Now I'm enlightened because I know myself as awareness. The two sides of the coin really are not two. The substance of everything literally is awareness, in the description of it. But in the experience, there's just simply being. And being shows up as this touching, smelling, tasting. It's extraordinarily simple. And in some ways, that's why the thinking, reasoning mind can't quite get it, because it really is as simple as being. And in a very real way, what happens when one explores all of this self-knowledge, the deepest understanding is a returning to innocence. And again, in my particular case, I was very blessed because it was just like when I was a younger child hanging around with my grandmother. It was very much like that, and it's very much like that today. And you know, I'm one of those people that had the extraordinary blessing of having this twice in my life, with my grandmother and with Jean Klein. So, as I've said a couple of times, and what you have said, I've been really, really fortunate, and I'm well aware of that.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Very well said. So, I have few things to say. I will try to make them short because they're kind of long. So, I will see if I can complete them in like few minutes. So, because you had so much yoga experience as well as meeting with many teachers, also you read many books. That was the reason I asked you about awakening or realization experience. Because how I came into spirituality or how I became interested in it was slightly accidental. So what happened was, long time back I read somebody whom I thought was speaking truth and really knew. So I basically trusted him, not because he asked me to trust him, but because what he said, what he wrote, sounded true to me. So he said that enlightenment, realization, awakening is very rare. He said that any time in world, maybe there are 7 enlightened people. And it's not something that he can cause. It's not something that he can, it might happen if you try this lifetime, maybe next lifetime also try. Maybe you keep trying for 50 lifetime, maybe it will happen. So I thought, okay, I'm not even sure about this lifetime. What control I have on what I'm going to do on next lifetime. I don't even know what I did in last lifetime. So anyway, so I never looked for any enlightenment, realization, awakening, nothing. I simply assumed that it might be something wonderful, but it's something that is not going to happen, so why bother? So it's not something that I look for. And I went to India. I met a guy whom one of my relatives praised. He said that this guy is special. His eyes are glowing, or he has some special shakti, a special power. He looked pretty ordinary to me. He's not even well known. His name is, I'm pretty sure you haven't heard of him. Not many people have heard. He's he's not famous at all. His name is R.P. Singh. Anyway, so I met him once, and so he basically put his hand on my head, and he said that he had transferred something into me, and he had awakened my first chakra. So I said, whatever. I didn't ask for it, and I didn't really feel anything, and I didn't really know what he meant. And I definitely didn't feel anything special around him, the way you spoke about John Klein. I didn't feel anything special at all. He talked about few things, and most of them sounded illogical to me. So you can say that I wasn't I wasn't trying to argue with it or debate it, but I wasn't. You can say I wasn't very impressed, but I wasn't looking to get impressed. I was just meeting him as a friend, so that's fine. But when I came home that night and I slept, very early morning, just before waking up, I did feel something very different in so-called first chakra place. Something that I never felt before, something that I have never felt afterwards. An entire day, some kind of energy kept flowing through my body. And so much energy like kept coming to my fingertips that it was very unusual, and I had to somehow dissipate it. So I will like I felt as if like I should touch everybody or like shake hand. If nothing, then I'll just touch my body. So basically, I was trying to discharge myself. Anyway, so that happened. And this guy made a prediction about himself. He said that basically in 2.5 years or 3 years, he will get a great enlightening experience, great awakening experience. And he had also said that I have transferred all I have spiritually into you. And at a spiritual level, basically, now there is no difference between you and me. So again, my approach was whatever. I mean, I didn't try to argue with it, debate it. I hadn't asked for it. So anyway, so I came here to USA and I just continued my normal life. Nothing special, nothing had changed. And one day I had some kind of ache, some kind of pain. And this was kind of strange. Strange in the sense like I couldn't know why it was happening, what it was. So sometimes I will feel it in one part, sometime in another part, sometime in my teeth. I thought, I don't know what it is. So, I mean, they know way. I don't even understand it, so they know way I can cure it. So why bother? So I just went to sleep. And after I slept, I don't even know what time I woke up because after some time, I don't know after how long time, I realize that I'm already awake in a sense like my eyes are open and I'm aware of everything in a sense like I'm awake, physically awake. But for whatever duration, I had no idea that I was physically awake. So there were no thoughts, there were no dreams, there were no feeling of the body, no stress, no strain. So no physical, I mean, so I'm physically awake without like usual mental, psychological or thinking feeling of being awake. And I was literally stunned. I didn't know what had happened, and I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't understand. So my first feeling was that I'm going to die, basically. I thought maybe this is how you feel when you are really going to die, and that was very strong feeling. I thought I am gone, basically, and I didn't know what to do about it. So anyway, and I went to bathroom and I closed the door. So once I closed the door, I started hearing this like I started feeling as if the entire space around me is buzzing with like very high intense energy. As if somehow I was aware of, directly aware of so-called dark energy, so-called dark matter. Or as if I was hearing like, I mean, subatomic particles inside atom go very fast and very rapid. I thought like this space, this emptiness is just an illusion. This is like really, really very vibrant, very dynamic. And I don't know what word to say. It's like I am in the middle of some like very bubbling energy that is just bursting. And it was kind of scary. So I was afraid to close my eyes because when I close my eyes and I hear this, I think, what the hell is happening? So I open my eyes, at least I see that everything. I see the toilet seat, I see the bathroom, I see everything. So I know, okay, somehow I'm feeling this, but at least, I mean, this is, I don't know why I'm feeling that, but in reality, nothing has changed. Still, I have my body, still there is bathroom and everything. After some time, I had to go and do laundry. So I started walking, and now I don't feel my body at all. So my body not giving me any signal. So usually I feel this thick, solid, dense body. Now I feel no body at all. I feel there is no real difference between the space that is called empty, non-existing, and the body that I can see and that looks solid. I feel that I am just part of that space, and I feel as if I have no weight, nothing. I mean, I don't get any sensation of body at all. And that was again very stunning. And it was magical to me that I can still move my hand, I can like do things, and I don't get any like, so I do this, but I don't get this feedback that this is my body or this is I'm doing. This is as if like I have entered some kind of robot, and when I say something to robot does, but robot doesn't somehow like feedback to me that, oh, this is you actually. And all the thing was stunning. I mean, and that's what basically started me into spirituality. So first I read all the symptoms of cancer, AIDS, any disease that I could find terminal. I even read about effect of drugs, everything. I started reading about brain, and I also started reading about spirituality. I started reading like Ramana Maharshi. I mean, I before that I heard Ramana Maharshi name once in somebody else's book. Actually, I didn't even know who he was. Nisargadatta, I have never even heard of him. So I started reading them, trying to understand. So that's why. So I because you had this yoga experience, because you have been to guru. So I thought, okay, once you describe something, I will ask you. Maybe you can relate to it, or maybe you can comment, or maybe from your perspective, you can say how it happens or what it is, anything. So that was basically why I asked that questions, and then I'll quickly say something about what you describe non-duality. So, an analogy of Klein I like a lot is pretty good. So, one analogy I had was basically, see, there is a dancer and there is a dance. There is a musician and there is music. There is a flute and there is a sound coming out of it. So, you cannot say that this sound exists, because this sound is very much dependent on the flute, dependent on the person playing the flute. It's not separate. You cannot say that, oh, this sound has its separate existence. It doesn't. It's only the whoever is playing it is playing it. You cannot even say that sound doesn't exist, because it clearly exists. You can hear it. It might be pleasant, it might be like not pleasant, but it does exist. But it doesn't exist independently. So what I call this body, this self, everything. So everything exists in a similar way. So it exists because it clearly is, just like the sound that is coming out of a flute. But it doesn't exist because it's not independent. Just like the sound coming out of flute or dance of a dancer, this thing is not, neither is independent nor it is separate. Nor it exists, nor it doesn't exist. So even at the form level, even at the thought level, or even at the mental level, consciousness level, it's not that easy to describe it, because in one way it is separate, in the sense like even if the sound goes away, the one that has sung it, one that has played it is still there. It's not affected by it. So it's not really separate, yet it is at some level separate, because sound can go away, sound can stop, singer can still be there, dance can stop, dancer can still be there. So same way this reality, whatever we call it, God, Allah, Tao, Buddha, nature, emptiness, before Big Bang, absolute, is unseen. We don't see it, but actually everything that you see is this dance, is play. And everything that exists is not ever separate from it, is not ever independent of it, yet it can exist without any of that. So that was what, I mean, that is what my understanding is. So again, I know, like, I try to summarize it. Still, I know I took some time. Okay, so thanks a lot.
Thank you, Arvind. I'm going to start with what you were just speaking about first. I use the same metaphor of a dancer, and what I say is the dancer is the dance. So if you go to a dance performance and the dancer doesn't show up, there's not going to be a dance that evening. So literally the dancer and the dance are the same thing. It's the nature of a dancer to dance. The dancer expresses herself or himself by this activity we call dancing. And so clearly the two are not two. But again, we're doing the best we can to speak about these things, and so we objectify these things to be able to speak about them at all. Another metaphor that I use is a river. And the commentary I was making earlier about a person who has identified themselves as a separate entity, the personality. Well, what I said already is that the personality, it's an idea. It's not really an entity. But you could see how this entity forms through this analogy of a river. So you have a flowing river, and there's an obstacle like a large rock in this river. And then just downstream from the rock, there's a whirlpool. Now, the whirlpool is a localized, limited, temporary form. And as a form, it's there. It's true that there is this form. But clearly, the substance of the whirlpool is the river water that's flowing. And it's just simply flowing in this orderly pattern. So, the physicists, scientists have proved that what we call matter is simply energy functioning in a pattern. And so here, energy is the motion of the river. The pattern is helped by that rock, which is a metaphor. It represents the conditioning of society. Society, your parents, siblings, teachers, they teach you to identify with your name and with your form. And so you start to identify with the localized, limited whirlpool. And the truth is, it's all water. Now, your experience, what you were just describing a moment ago, that experience, well, there is this body, and you're alive and awake, but you're not alive and awake in the same way as you were before this particular experience that you just described. And that particular experience, yeah, it's really strange. And so the strangeness of it, because it's not known, the thinking, reasoning mind typically has fear associated with that. So experiences of that nature are mixed in a variety of ways. One thing that's often a part of it is the fear, and the fear is because the thinking, reasoning mind doesn't know this experience and is afraid that it may die, or it makes catastrophic conclusions based on something that it has no idea about. But if you go back to the analogy of the river that is simply water that's flowing, and the localized form of the whirlpool, well, the identification of the localized form of the whirlpool, that's the identification of identifying as a limited, localized form, the personality. It's possible to relax that understanding and to not function from that localized, limited way. And then the experience is more global. The form is still there, like you were saying, your body was still there. But the experience of being more globally the entire river and its flow, everything is there, and all is available to you. And I won't go too far into this, but if you expand the metaphor somewhat, there can be many, many other whirlpools in this river. And if the identification is not the localized, limited, but more the global, then not only do you have an experience that there's an awareness of that form, but you don't really identify with the localized form, but you can also connect with other forms. And in a certain way, this would explain, what are called psychic experiences like clairvoyance and telepathy and things of that nature, because everything is connected to that one source, the river. And there are many, many, there's as many whirlpools as there are objects in what we call time and space. So the way I understand the experience that you had, that you described, regardless of how it came about, through that shakti or the touch of that person, is one way that those things can be awakened. But regardless of how it came about, the understanding of the true nature of being is very much like that. It's no longer limited and localized or temporary. There's a global quality to it, like the river itself and the flowing motion of all of the things that are experienced in the realm of form. All of that is there. The thing that is absent is the identification in the limited, localized way. And so for the limited, localized mind, the thinking, reasoning mind, this is very strange. And it can be quite scary because it simply does not know this. It's entered into something which is the river is really knowing itself. It is actually that quality of presence that, you use the words like Allah, the Tao, God, consciousness, or whatever the label is for it. When people who speak about such things, they talk about the omnipotent, omniscient qualities of that quality of being that those words point to. So there is a so-called experience, and then what happens is that the thinking, reasoning mind is trying to figure this out. And so in the same way that in the awkwardness of the way we're speaking about non-duality, there's the awkwardness of having had an experience of this nature, and then after the fact attempting to explain it. And we have this awkwardness of language, and the limitations of language are the tools that we use to explain such things. I would say that it's a benediction. It's a grace that you've had such an experience, and that the way I was speaking earlier, and you've obviously come to some kind of terms and understanding with this, because you come back in a certain way to be able to function and do our everyday lives. So the nature of it is a resting in awareness and understanding that the world of form is still there, and that we function in this particular way. But the true understanding of non-duality would be said more like, well, that world of form is me. And what I was thinking before as so-called being external or outside of me, everything in this understanding is included. So it doesn't deny the functionality of responding to my name and my form and doing like a job, for example. But the understanding of the true nature of being is such that nothing is left out, and that the substance of being is everything. So all these forms, the understanding is such that the word external does not apply. There cannot be those two things, internal and external. There's only this. And then the way that the sages, like Nisargadatta, say is, I am that, or tattvamasi, that thou art.
Okay, so thank you very much again, James. So I think we'll conclude it in like a few minutes, maybe about 4 or 5 minutes. So if there is anything like any concluding remark or anything about how people can contact you, how they can reach you, and I'll also list your website, and if you want even your email in the video summary. So any concluding remark that you want to make?
The only thing I really want to say is thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for the opportunity to share mine and to connect with you. I find that this is the first time I've done something of this nature. I find the technology amazing, that these forms can be in such faraway places and yet connect. So obviously the technology and the fact that it can happen, I think, is another one of these extraordinary examples about the nature of being, and that in a certain way it's a living example. But the content of what we're sharing, I think, is very worthwhile, and that from my end, and I feel the same kind of thing from your end, that's just simply that we share with gratitude for having the grace of being blessed with such understanding, and the only thing that we can do to express our gratitude is to share it with others. So it's something that's given from the heart and it's offered with love.
So thank you very much. Namaskar.